What analog EQs do you use in Mastering Studio B? So this here is Mastering Studio B, also the Dolby Atmos Studio. Now I've pulled in my two sidecars here and I've filled them with stereo mastering gear. And the reason for that is I want to be able to do the Dolby Atmos mixing in here, and then I want to be able to master all those Dolby Atmos mixes in stereo as well through analog gear in the same room. So in here I use a combination of various different EQs. I've got the Muse EQ, I've got the Handcrafted Labs Thermos version 3. I've also got on the Solid State Logic Fusion a high and low shelf. Over here we have what is technically an EQ and compressor, is the Golly cross compressor EQ, and then above that we have the Golly Dynamic EQ, the shelving unit. So they're in there, what we got, five different styles of EQ. Now some people will ask me, why do you need 5 different EQs? Surely one EQ is sufficient. You could get away with just one EQ. You can use one EQ. It is a luxury to have multiple EQs because each EQ has a different sort of flavour, a different sound to it, and if you have multiple EQs you use them all for a different purpose. So what I have here on the Fusion, I've got the high and low shelf EQ. Now that's at the start of my chain, so what I'm basically using that for is just to give a little bit of nudge. If required, brightness in the tops and then a little bit of bump in the low end. I've then got the Mus EQ or the Muse EQ or the Musec on the Fusion's insert. So this is used in mid side. So the left hand side is controlling the mono signal and then the right hand side is controlling the side. So that can be used in really well. I would always recommend, if you've got a mastering chain, to have a mid-side EQ in it as well, because technically speaking the sides, the EQ on the sides becomes a really detailed stereo widener, and you can use that to great effect. Also as well is sometimes you don't want to increase the bass on the sides or in a stereo image, you just want to do it in the mono section. So that's where you can go ahead and use the mid to just kind of control and increase the bass, for instance, but make sure that you are only increasing what is in the mono image. Then after that we have the Thermos, the Handcrafted Labs Thermos V3. This is a brilliant EQ, really passive EQ, lovely sounding, 4-band EQ, has mid-side built into it, so you always have that option of adding more mid-side if it's required. It's a totally different style of EQ in the way that it sounds to the Muse EQ. It's got a brilliant sound to it. This is the EQ that I recommend anyone who's generally on a budget. If you're on a budget of, let's say, I mean, they're £3,000 and they perform like £6,000 EQs. You know, I've put it side by side with my Analogue MEA2, and you know they sound slightly different, of course, but that stands up against it as a great sounding EQ. Then if we go over to here, we've got the Golly Cross Comp EQ. Now, if we just think about it as from the EQ standpoint, we've got basically a low and a high band EQ with Q and frequency. So it's basically what we can create is what is considered like a back EQ. So you've got a low and high. Then when it's combined with the one above it, the Golly Dynamic EQ, we have the roll off. So we've got a high and low shelf roll off, or rather a low cut, high and low cut roll off. So we can use the two in combination to create what is considered a back EQ. The Golly Dynamic EQ, that's this one at the top. Now that's used as a different way of it's a different EQ to anything else that's in this chain. It's dynamic EQ. So basically, when the threshold is met, the gain reduction comes down, much like a compressor, but instead of compressing sound, it's just reducing gain. So if you've got something in the high end or in the low end, the low end's a great example, because let's say you've got in a master, you've got something that's really pumping, the bass is a touch too loud. What you can do is, instead of a compressor, like a multiband compressor, a compressor will compress that sound, whereas a dynamic EQ will just bring the volume down. So it's basically like riding the gain. So whenever it gets too loud, the volume just comes down each time. Dynamic EQ is an essential part of mastering. You should really look into having dynamic EQ if you don't already, because it's just like compression, but it's EQ reduction rather than compression. So yeah, they are my 5 EQs that I've got here. I also have the option of turning the envelope into a kind of like an EQ, but I don't do that. So that's a kind of Easter egg that's in the envelope. Yeah, apart from that, they are my EQs that I have in the Mastering Studio B.